negative 32. These last few problems are, as you can see here, absolute value equations and negatives. Remember, absolute values can never be negative. If the absolute value expression equals a negative, then there's no solution. So when you're solving an absolute value equation, as you can see here, you might get a negative answer. But take the math and try to interpret it literally, meaning the absolute value itself can never equal a negative number. So look at this one. Let's isolate the absolute value by subtracting 7. And we'll get that the absolute value of x minus 2, right, equals 3 minus 7 is negative 4. This is what I was just trying to explain, that even though when you solve an absolute value equation, a final answer might be negative, like x equals a negative number, before you write it into two equations, right, when you get your absolute value by itself, before you write it into two equations, it can't equal a negative value. If it does, then it has no solution. The absolute value, when it's still the absolute value, can't equal a negative value. So remember, the concept was whatever's in here is negative 4 spaces away from 0, and then the follow-up thought is distance can't be negative. If I walk in any direction 4 feet, I still walked 4 feet. Just because I walked backwards doesn't mean that I moved negative 4 feet. That's not accurate. So moving along, let me isolate, rewrite, and solve. I'm going to isolate this one by first subtracting 5. Remember, I'm trying to get this thing by itself, right? The absolute value. So I'm going to subtract 5. I still have negative 3 times the absolute value of x minus 2. 14 minus 5 is 9. Remember, you don't distribute into absolute value. I'm going to divide by a negative here, negative 3, to get the absolute value of x minus 2 equals negative 3. And once again, you see here, once the absolute value got isolated, it equaled a negative number, which isn't okay other than to say that it's no solution. You definitely can't keep solving this. It'll be wrong. You got to recognize once the absolute value is isolated, if it equals a negative value, it's no solution. So these last few guys, remember, isolate, rewrite, solve. So I'm going to isolate this one by first adding 5, right? Minus 5's got to go in order to isolate the absolute value. I still have a 2 times the absolute value of x. 1 plus 5 is 6. Now I have to divide by 2 to get the absolute value completely isolated. Once I do that, I have the absolute value of x equals 6 divided by 2 is 3, which means I'm ready to write my two equations, where one equals positive 3 and the other one equals negative 3. And as mentioned earlier, sometimes when I rewrite the two equations, there's no more work left. It's already solved. Next problem. 16 equals negative 5 times the absolute value of x minus 4. Add 4. As your first step in isolating the absolute value. 16 plus 4 is 20. Negative 5 times the absolute value of x. 4 is gone. Divide by negative 5 to finish isolating the absolute value. 20 divided by negative 5 is negative 4. And the negative 5 is gone. So I do have my absolute value isolated, but what's wrong with this, right? Hopefully you see that your absolute value of x is equal to a negative number, and what do you do with that, right? Remember, your absolute value cannot equal a negative number, so no solution. Don't forget, for no solution, you can also write that. Next one, I'm going to isolate the absolute value by dividing by negative 2. So negative 2 is gone, which leaves my absolute value isolated. Negative number, or here, negative number divided by negative number, it's going to give me a positive number, so positive 4, meaning I can keep going with this one. It's not a negative number. The absolute value is isolated. It equals a positive number, so I can keep going. It's going to have two solutions, not no solution. So 2x minus 4 equals 4, and 2x minus 4 equals negative 4. So I'm going to solve these two now, and that is by adding 4 as my first step here. So cross that out. 4 plus 4 is 8. 2x equals 8. If you divide by 2, you will get x equals 4. So I'm just going to try to write that in. I'm running out of space here, guys. Sorry about that. And 2x minus 4 equals negative 4. I'm going to solve that one now. Same steps. Add 4, divide by 2. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0. So 2x equals 0. And if I divide, 0 divided by any number is still 0. So my two answers were that x equals 4 and that x equals 0. So basically you could take those numbers and go plug them back into this and test it out, right? Like 2 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 4 is negative 4, but a positive 4 comes out, and positive 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. If you plug in a 4, 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 minus 4 is 4, and 4 times negative 2 is still negative 8. So again, point was that you can plug these numbers in to check your answer. Last one, okay? I'm going to isolate the absolute value on this one by subtracting 12. Absolute value would be isolated at that point, so I'd be ready to rewrite my two equations. However, 9 minus 12 is negative 3, so I don't even need to keep going. I don't need to write two equations. Once I isolate the absolute value, it can't equal a negative number. If it does, then I have to write no solution.